Hi everyone, and welcome back to Fred Talks, a podcast where we talk all about the fashion industry and why it might be more important than you'd think, but less glamorous than it seems. Today's episode is a big comeback episode because not only I am making comeback with this podcast, but also an equally important and an equally anticipated, I have to say, comeback happened, and that is Victoria's Secret fashion show. For those who don't know what Victoria's Secret is, it was one of the, probably the biggest underwear company from the 90s up till the mid-2010s where things started to fall. But before, it was the juiciest, the sexiest, the brand with the most extravagant and with most expensive commercials and campaigns. And each year they would hold an annual fashion show called the Victoria's Secret Fashion Show, which for a lot of years was the most anticipated fashion show of the year. And the reason why was because it was fun. It was always this very lively and very, again, extravagant and just kind of like a sexy party, to me, celebration of women's sexuality. However, as much as this wasn't an issue in the early 2000s and the 90s, although it should have been, but unfortunately wasn't, Victoria's Secret never represented all body types. Nowhere near they represented all body types. And I know a lot of people have the opinion that Victoria's Secret was just fun and it was never something to be attainable, like it was always something to look at, but you never expected yourself to look like a Victoria's Secret fashion model. I also understand the point of view that it was setting unrealistic body types or body beauty standards, because let's be honest, no one looks like a Victoria's Secret fashion model. Maybe very, very few people do, but even Victoria's Secret angels themselves had to train hard like professional athletes, had to be on very strict diets to look like they did on the runway. Not to mention that the underwear, for example, the bras I'm talking about specifically, had a ridiculous amount of paddings. So not only the women were very thin, but they also had the curves that, normally you probably wouldn't have. I think obviously there will be women who are just naturally blessed to have big breasts and thin waist and, very flat stomachs. But it's not the majority. And I believe that, or I see how a lot of people feel unrepresented. I mean, I'm saying this as if I look like a Victoria's Secret model and they represent me. No, I don't. But I personally never saw this as something that I should follow, as in like I should look like them. But a lot of people did. And as I already said, as much as this wasn't really an issue in the 90s, early 2000s, as the fashion industry started to change and started to be more inclusive, obviously the audience wanted the Victoria's Secret to catch up, and they refused, which was very much the beginning of their fall. The complete death was when Rihanna stepped in and she showed us her Savage X Fenty fashion show, where she invited women of all sizes, women of all color, men as well. And the world was fascinated because this was nothing that we've ever seen before in the fashion industry, in the underwear department especially. They did try to do a rebrand in 2022, but it wasn't much of a rebrand. From what I remember, they pretty much only did an event where they invited a bunch of celebrities, models and influencers, and that was about it. There was no big campaign or no proper fashion show happening, so that was pretty much a flop. Until this year, when they announced that the Victoria's Secret fashion show as we know it will come back. Well, as we know it. It was not meant to be as we know it. It was meant to be more modern, more diverse, more inclusive. But was it really? I obviously watched the fashion show, and the first thing that caught my eye was the design set, because Victoria's Secret was always famous for their big and expensive and colorful and elegant and always changing design set. The runway was always elevated. It was always sort of like a pedestal. Now this year, however, we had no runway pretty much. It was just the floor. And the floor was so cheaply and so badly made. I think a lot of you have seen the clip of where Delson Cruz was walking the runway and her heel got literally stuck in between. I believe it was where the lifts were going up and down. I think they tried to impress us with the little lifts where some of the angels would literally go up from the downstairs on the runway. However, because this was that, it created a little gap where her heel got stuck in, and she tried to just kick it off and just walk and continue without the heel, because it's not the first time that the shoe just fell off. However, because the shoe was tied up around her ankle and up her leg, she couldn't kick it out because it just got stuck on her leg. So she had to put it back on and then continue walking. And I mean, props to her. Everyone kind of loved the moment because of the professionality she showed. But I don't know if America doesn't know health and safety, but this could never happen in England. This was such a stupid moment, and I don't understand how no one caught that this was genuinely dangerous for the models, for a gap to be in the floor. Like, I don't understand how that even happened. Another thing is that the venue itself didn't really look any special. I know they tried to make it all fancy with the lighting, but it's not gonna save the day when we see that it's very empty. It was a very empty space. There was no decoration. The only thing they had was a big screen at the end of a runway, which is something very common, and especially at the new designers, or if there's a fashion show where it's a joint show and there's multiple designers, because obviously if you're not a famous designer, you want to have your name at the end of the runway so everyone can always see it at the background and remember you. So to have this as the only design asset at Victoria's Secret fashion show is really sad and very underwhelming, to say at least. However, what was good, in my opinion, and what is also part of production and very famous for Victoria's Secret fashion shows, is the music. Because not only the fashion shows always had live music as well as normal played music in the background, they also were always diverse. If Victoria's Secret was diverse in one thing, it was the music, because we always had multiple genres at the fashion show, which is very unusual, because if you think about it, majority of fashion shows always have music in the background, but for most of it, it's instrumental, and that is because instrumental music fits more the vibe of a haute couture fashion show. However, for Victoria's Secret, it's a lot better to have more of a lively music. They always have different music for different sections, because Victoria's Secret fashion shows consist of multiple collections, not just one, as any other fashion show. We always have pop music, which is usually the performance, because at Victoria's Secret fashion show, as long as I remember, there's usually 2 or 3 performers, I believe. This year it was 3 performers. I'll get to it later. But usually we've got a pop song, then we've got a rock song, then we've got some slower songs, which are usually still pop, but they're slower, more romantic. And that's about it, I believe. But I feel like the music was what made the fashion shows, because if you think about it, Victoria's Secret always managed to entertain everyone. Even though if you're not a fashion enthusiast, a lot of people just watch the fashion show for the fun of it. And I think the music is a big part, because if you watch a show and you hear a song that you don't have to necessarily like, but you just know it because it's played everywhere in the radio, you start jamming to it and you start feeling the music and you start enjoying it, and it kind of keeps you entertained to continue watching the show. And this year has not disappointed. We had Lisa, we had Tyler, and we had Cher. All of them, I think the performances were great. I actually think the performances itself were the better part of the fashion show, were the more entertaining part of the fashion show. I also love that all the performers were women only, because it again feeds the feel of women supporting women, and that is what Victoria's Secret has always been for me. Or it hasn't always been it, but it feels like it's what it always should have been. So I really like this aspect. I'm not trying to say that when there were male performers they were creepy or anything really, but I can imagine the male gaze because they were looking at the models. In my opinion, it was always more of a look of admiring the beauty of the models, but I can imagine how it can feel uncomfortable for both the models and the people watching, or the women watching it. So I like that they brought all women only. I've seen online people complaining about the quality of the performance, but I think that honestly they were the better part of the show. So in my opinion, that was good. With that, we've got one positive thing, the music, and one negative thing, the cheap set design. However, both of those can be easily forgivable and forgettable if the following 2 things that I want to talk about are great. And those are the outfits and the models. I'll start with the outfits because I think it's going to be quicker. A lot of people, and myself included, complained about the fact that it just felt cheap. It really feels like the budget went on paying the models, because just like the set design, the wings just wearing it. We didn't see the craftsmanship that went to them. We didn't see the details. We didn't see the expensive materials. It was not done properly. A lot of them looked like something you can get off Amazon. I'm not gonna lie to you. Some of the wings genuinely reminded me of a Halloween costume that you go and buy in a Halloween costume shop for like 20 quid maximum. However, this I believe could have been intentional and could have been because, as we know, the wings that we saw before, the magnificent, beautiful, huge wings, were ridiculously heavy and it was really uncomfortable for models to wear. I can't imagine how women with such a slim figures could physically carry those incredibly large and heavy wings whilst wearing high heels. That's admirable, and I believe that maybe the designers try to make them lighter, hence looking cheaper, so it's more comfortable for the models. Could it have been done in a less cheap looking way? I'm not sure. I'm not a specialist at it. I'll let you be judge of that, but I think that this might have not been a case of laziness, but a case of making it more comfortable for models, which I appreciate. When we look at the outfits themselves, I watched the show twice, and the first time I watched it, at the end of it, couldn't really remember what I just saw. Like, none of the outfits really spoke to me at all, to be honest. But when I watched it the second time, and I had more time focusing on the actual garments, which I should have been focusing in the first place, but I will explain shortly why I haven't. Anyway, when I was watching it again, I was thinking that actually quite a lot of the outfits I like and I would buy because they look very wearable. And I think this year, Victoria's Secret has really gone for being relatable, for being more for the women, really, and not as much of a glamorous and exaggerated sort of vibe or sort of a brand, I would say, because we not only saw very, I would say, timid outfits compared to what we saw in the previous years, but there was also no fantasy bra and there was no pink section. With the pink section, a lot of people complain about it because it was part of the fashion show. Pink section was always the fun and more youthful, which that is something I have to point out how ridiculous that is, because to me, I always saw the pink section as the one for younger audience, for like girls that are teenagers, I'd say 16 plus, 18 plus, I don't really know. But for the younger audience, as I said. And it's quite ridiculous because obviously that pink section was modeled on girls that were younger, but there were also models that were like 25. Just like the normal, more adult section was worn by models that were 18 and models that were older, which it just shows the ridiculousness of the industry, but that's a conversation for another day. Anyway, when I was watching the show, I didn't even realize that there was no pink section, I have to be honest. So I didn't miss it much. I never really enjoyed the pink section all that much. I do see its beauty and I definitely think there's a place for it. It's just my personal opinion, which doesn't really matter in a great scheme of things. But a lot of people complain about there not being any pink section. And I honestly can't really see why there wasn't. I think it was because the Victoria's Secret fashion show really tried to be more for matured women. Because if you think about it, who can at the age of 16, 17, 18 afford to buy Victoria's Secret? And why would you even do it? Because most likely you don't have to feel sexy at that age. Plus, the choice of the models that Victoria's Secret hired this year suggests that they are now trying to focus more on mature women, which I will talk about in a second. But what was also missing besides the pink section was the fantasy bra, which a lot of people were upset about because the fantasy bra was the peak of the fashion show. It was something that everyone was excited for, and it was the piece of art, in my opinion, in the collections. And I think that the reason why they didn't do it was either because they didn't have the budget for it, which is probably most likely, but also because Victoria's Secret, again, as I said a million times already, is really trying to be more relatable, and showing a $1 million bra is not it really, because no one's gonna buy it and it's not something that's wearable. What I think is a shame is the fact that there was nothing really special. All of the collections that we saw just felt a bit the same. There was a subtle difference in the vibe of each collection, but with the missing pink section and with the missing fantasy bra, they didn't really differ from each other all that much. Really, the only thing that divided them were the music performances. And that's not how it was in the previous fashion shows. Yes, the music was always a big part of it, but it wasn't what divided each section. It was the clothes in each section that divided from each other. Overall, the fashion, being as it was, being as plain as it was, just felt a bit boring, or not even boring, but it wasn't really anything interesting. It didn't differentiate itself from any other underwear brand on the market. And now we are getting to maybe the most important part, maybe even more important than the fashion itself, at least in the case of Victoria's Secret fashion shows, and that is the models. The lack of diversity in the models was what originally sent the Victoria's Secret fashion shows and the Victoria's Secret as a brand to downfall, because as I said before, when Rihanna stepped into the game and she showed us how it can be done, no one really cared about the one body type models at Victoria's Secret. So when they announced the comeback this year, everyone was really interested in what they're gonna do, if they're gonna bring more models. And to be quite honest, I am very much surprised by how many people were actually happy with the diversity of the models that we saw, because they could have done a lot better. I want to start with the body types. There's obviously a lot of categories when it comes to diversity, but I'm going to start with body types because, yes, we did have some plus size models. I think we actually had 2 models that could be considered plus size. Then we had some that just look like an average woman, and then the rest were the model bodies, which is nothing wrong with that. I am very glad, I have to say this, I'm very glad that we got rid of the bra paddings, because that was not helping anyone. And with this, we do represent the very thin models, because I feel like a lot of the times people forget that there are flat-chested, no bum, naturally very thin women who, again, weren't represented at Victoria's Secret because everyone had the ridiculously padded bras, which give you a lot bigger chest than you probably originally have. So I'm glad we got that. I'm glad we got rid of those. I am glad that we saw some, a bit more fuller women, but you could have done a lot more. Considering how much criticism Victoria's Secret received in the past, I would expect them to do it. I don't want to say 50-50, because that's another thing, or another problem that the industry has, and that is that we believe that there are 2 body types for women, curvy and thin, which is ridiculous. And we actually had this discussion during the Olympics, when a lot of women were very pleased with the female athletes, because obviously their body types are very different based on the sport that they're doing. And that was actually, even though obviously that was not about the body types at all, but there was such a large scale of diversity, and a lot of women just felt seen. And I think a lot of women start to feel better about their bodies, because when they see that this woman is a gold medalist in whatever sport and she's got big thighs and that's what helped her to get the gold medal, it just feels a lot more calming, I would say, for women compared to when they see Victoria's Secret angels. Which, again, there are women who look like Victoria's Secret angels, but I would just assume that they will bring a lot more body types. Was it better than last year? Yes. Was it still good enough? Absolutely not, in my book. A very similar thing is with diversity when it comes to races. Where were my brown girls? We had none of those. We had very few Asians. We had a lot more black women, which was great. At least we moved in this direction. At least we progressed in this direction. But still, the majority were just white women. And again, nothing against them, but considering the criticism, you would assume, or you would expect, there will be a lot more colors going on, quite honestly, both in the models and the outfits, because none of them were very exciting in this sense. What they did correctly, though, in my opinion, is the age range, because they brought back a lot of OG models. We had Adriana, we had Alessandra Ambrosio, we had Beate Prinsloo, we had Candice, we had Tyra closing the show. And obviously, all of these aren't 20 anymore, because if you are an OG model, it means that you've been working for the brand for a while, and the brand had a 6-year break. Now, in the modeling industry, a woman ages faster than the milk on a sun, so 6 years is a lot. And I really like that all those women are now in their mid-30s, early 40s, and they looked hot. They even brought other models like Kate Moss or Carla Bruni or Eva Herzigova, who are all, Kate Moss she's in her 40s, but Eva Herzigova, I believe, is in her 50s, and so is Carla Bruni. And they all looked amazing. And I really like the fact that I would say majority of the models were older, or at least good half were 30 plus, which I already said that before, but that's your targeted audience. That's the women who will buy the underwear. So show how the underwear looks on the women who will buy it, not an 18-year-old. I'm not saying we shouldn't have models in their early 20s. Of course we should, because, I mean, girls in their early 20s, especially today, I feel like, will probably buy your underwear. But I think it shouldn't be just one or another. I liked how they balanced it, and it was really older women looking hot, younger women looking hot. Everyone sort of complemented each other, I would say. So I like the fact that they showed us what I always thought Victoria's Secret should be about, celebrating women and celebrating their sexuality. One thing I have to mention though is that I saw a couple people complaining about the older models and the plus size models being more covered than the thin and young, but I don't really think that's true. I think that's just something people want to nitpick about. Why are you even doing that? We had so many other things you can complain about and it would be rightful. But I have noticed that both thin and young models and older or plus size models wore what felt more like a garment. There were more layers, it was longer, more coverage. And I personally liked it because I also think that sexy doesn't always mean red bra. It doesn't mean that for everyone. So I'm glad that they showed us that you can wear a long lace black dress and be equally hot as when you are wearing a tiny tongs or tiny bra. So I personally don't think that there was an issue there, but a lot of people did. However, what was the biggest issue that everyone, myself included, had with the fashion show was the lack of energy. Victoria's Secret has always been known for the lively models that were serving on the stage, that were dancing, that were flirting with the audience, flirting with the camera, sending kisses. And what we had now? Nothing. Everyone, and I kid you not, I would say maybe 5 models in total looked like they were having fun. The rest looked like they were told 10 minutes before the show started they were not getting paid. That's genuinely what it looked like to me. No one seemed to be enjoying, and I think they all seemed very, again, timid, like they don't want to, not like they, well, some of them looked like they didn't want to be there. Some of them looked like they are unsure on what to do. And I genuinely don't think this is the model's fault, because I've been to a backstage enough times to see, I don't know, that they are told what to do and how to walk and how to look, you know, what facial expression they can have. And in my opinion, someone must have told them, because we had Alessandra Ambrosio, we had Adriana Lima, and they were not serving at all. We had Kate Moss, and yes, Kate Moss has never walked for Victoria's Secret, but we have seen her in the past. We know this girl can walk, so why was she serving nothing? Why was everyone serving nothing? I know some people were complaining about Tyra pretty much stomping on the heels and not being very elegant with her walk, but at least she looked like she was enjoying herself. At least she had some energy. Everyone else just looked upset. Like, I'm sorry, but Bella Hadid, beautiful woman, great model. Everyone was saying that the walk slight. No. Jesus Christ, she was so slow. I am sorry, but I genuinely was considering speeding it up because it was such a slow walk. And she looked incredible, but I don't know who told her that. She was walking to Cher as well, right? You have Cher in the background. You don't go with the music. No one, that's another thing. No one was walking to the rhythm, which is really annoying. And especially at Victoria's Secret, where the music is a lot more upbeat. So it's a lot more obvious when a model doesn't go with the rhythm. And that was the case for majority of them. The opening, Gigi Hadid opening, right? That was the most boring opening of a show I have seen in a while. I am sorry, but it was, again, slow. She didn't have a lot of energy. It felt like she's kind of trying, but she doesn't know what to do, which again, I don't believe it's her fault considering how experienced she is. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there and who told them to look annoyed, but that was a big flop. That was the worst part about the whole fashion show, and I think that's what really destroyed it. Some people say, and I agree with this theory, that Victoria's Secret really tried to be more modest and more accessible, more more haute couture, but you're not there to be haute couture. You're here to be commercial. You're here to be fun and to be lively. That's what made you different, and that's what made you interesting. So why did you throw it away? What should have happened was more diversity when it comes to models, and keep everything else. Digital white fin model, keep the energy, keep the spark, keep the glitter, keep the glamour. It really felt like Victoria's Secret was scared to bring this energy back. It really feel like the brand did not understand what we wanted, didn't understand what was the demand. We didn't want you to become haute couture, we didn't want you to become elegant. We wanted what you were before, but with more diverse models, because at the end of the day, it's all about your customers, right? If no one buys from you, you're done. So might as well listen to the demand and do what you are expected to do. However, I think it would be very unfair if we only criticize Victoria's Secret and not put it in the greater scheme of things when it comes to the fashion industry. Because everything that felt on this fashion show is a reflection of what the modeling industry is failing in, or the fashion industry in general. Because if you ask yourself, who are these supermodels? You always think about Linda Evangelista or Kate Moss or Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Christy Turlington. And why are there the supermodels? Why are there the original supermodels? Why a lot of people complain that nowadays we don't have supermodels, or we have very, very little of them, or we've had very little of them in the past 15 years. It's because they were lively, because they had fun on the runway. Everyone keeps talking about their work, about their facial expression. And as I said multiple times, whose fault it is? It's not the model's fault. It's the designers, it's the creative directors who tell the models to look a certain way, to not have any facial expression, to not really put any personality in there. And the same thing is with the runway. We complain that Victoria's Secret didn't have elevated runway, and I complain about it. I think it's a shame. But if you look at any, and I kid you not, any fashion show in the past 15, 20 years, point one elevated runway to me. Before, in the 90s, everyone had elevated runway. It was just the norm. And suddenly, I don't know why, I assume it's because it's cheaper, or maybe because of health and safety, I guess. But I think it's probably more because it's cheaper not to have runway. Everyone ditched the runway. When you're on a fashion show, people just walk, and it doesn't really make any sense, because if you sit anywhere past second row, you can't really see the outfits at all, which kind of defeats the point, because if you go to a fashion show, you want to see the whole garment, that's why you're there. And if the model is not above you, can't really see it. And a similar thing is with the length, because Victoria's Secret fashion shows are usually 40 minutes long, and the fashion shows before also used to be a lot longer than they are now. Now an average fashion show is like 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 if you're lucky. I actually remember an interview with Anna Wintour when she said that before she used to go to a fashion show and it would be 2 hours long. I don't know what I would do there for 2 hours. But it used to be a lot longer, and Victoria's Secret still continues in this sense. Victoria's Secret for the longest time has actually been the only brand that kept the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, but you get me, pattern when it comes to fashion shows. And because we were so used to it with them, now that they got up on the modern and ditched all the good things, we feel more upset about it. But this is not something that we should complain only to Victoria's Secret about. We should complain about this with the entire industry. Because if you loved it so much with Victoria's Secret, wouldn't you love it with any other brand? So you want to say something? What's your opinion on the Victoria's Secret? You watched that with me, didn't you? Did you like it? Sort of a more, I mean, usually it's pop, but it's slower and it's more elegant. I'm sorry that I just laughed, but my cat is staring at the camera.